see so many repeat customers. It's great. And some new faces too. It's good to have you all together. And just again, to say that the reason I came up with the idea of this series was because I was feeling isolated and wanted to figure out a way to connect with people in this time. And I figured a good way to connect with people was around one of my passions, which is film. And so I looked out to see what films I'd want to watch. And again, turns out they were all by women. So it was a really exciting way to put together a film series with films that people hadn't seen. Steve, I'm glad to hear that you hadn't seen all of them. And also filmmakers that people maybe hadn't heard of. So maybe Kelly Reichardt is one of these people. Just to see, you can raise your hand if you had heard of Kelly Reichardt before this week. Okay, so a couple people had. Excellent, good. I saw her film Wendy and Lucy, I think when I went to the New York Film Festival. Actually, I was teaching American movies at Randolph, and there was this pot of money to do experiential learning add-ons to our courses. So I actually took, I think it's about 10 students up to New York, and we went to the New York Film Festival. We stayed at the home of an alum, an apartment in New York City, and we went to a whole long weekend full of films. And it was an amazing experience for the students and for me. I love film festivals, first of all, and so the students, I think, had a great time. But I think that's where I first saw Kelly Reichardt's film Wendy and Lucy with Michelle Williams. If you haven't seen that one, I encourage you to see that. It is, well, watch it and then people can say if they think it's similar. But you probably know, if you've watched the film, that Kelly Reichardt is an independent filmmaker. Okay, so that's really important to think about. That's one of the things we might want to talk about. What is the difference between an independent filmmaker and a filmmaker working within the Hollywood studio system? So that makes a big difference, obviously. So she works usually with a writer. She co-writes her films, and she's worked with the same cinematographer on her films as well. And cinematography, right, the way that the environment is shot is very important also in this film. So just a couple things to kind of get us thinking. I'm happy to start wherever you want to start. Maybe what people thought. I know there's a sense of that. I think, Phoebe, did you describe it as heavy? It was a heavy film. I don't know. Other people, would you agree, disagree? How would you describe this film?
Dark.
Dark, okay.
Dark, I would go with that.
Depressing.
Yeah.
Oh.
Okay.
But it was depressing because they thought they were doing such a good thing.
Yes.
But in hindsight or from a distance, we know, and somewhere in the film, they discover that it wasn't a good thing because one dam was not going to make any difference. So the darkness was moderated for me by their disillusionment with what they were doing. So
I agree.
Especially the young
knew
people.
It was going to turn out badly. From the get-go, you knew it was going to be bad.
And why do you think you did, Mary Weish? Why did you think was it something, was it like a foreshadowing, or what was it?
Definitely because there was that idealistic young woman. I have some grandchildren just like that right now, and that manipulative young man, and that kind of bad other guy, and you just knew this was coming to no good end.
Yep. And Steve, were you saying something about their youth? Was there something about the youthfulness?
Yeah, the two young people, I mean, they had a kind of I think the Peter Sarsgaard character, he knew what this was about. You know, he was a little more, he reminded me at times of the character in The Hitchhiker. You know, he was seasoned. He knew what he was about. You know, he had this down, but the two younger characters were innocent in a certain kind of way, as far as this was heavy for them, and they had not really thought it through very well. And so when it went south in the way that it did, it really troubled them in a way that I don't think it troubled the older character, because in his mind, we're going to blow up the dam. If somebody gets killed, oh well. And they didn't really think about what the repercussions might be, other than themselves getting caught or something like that. So it was sad in a way, because they were so innocent and kind of caught up in something that I think they wanted to do something good, and they had not thought it through in the way they may have been. I don't think our brains are fully formed until we're 25. I think that's true, actually.
Okay.
They may have been under 25, so they may not have been fully formed, and here they were blowing up a dam. So it was very sad in a way for me to watch.
Tragic for Jesse.
Definitely for Jesse Eisenberg, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he didn't feel good about it from the beginning, I don't think. I mean, his face just he hadn't quite embraced this fully from the get-go, I didn't think, but.
There was something that I noticed with his character, because the first time he smiled in the whole film was at the explosion. I thought it was interesting how his character was just this very, like, what's the word? Like sort of stoic, like very grim. The whole way through, right up until the explosion. And that was the only time, it may have been the only time in the film that I saw him smile. I thought that was interesting.
Well, he didn't come from privilege, and the girl came from privilege.
He was
which
very,
I think
like,
was telling.
yes, yeah.
Yeah.
Her perspective was hard for me it was hard for me to understand how those two characters connected initially. I mean, obviously it was through a mutual connection, but there was not, like, it didn't seem like all three of the main characters had a similar drive.
I wanted so much to know about the background. How did they get together in the first place? How did Jesse know Dakota Fanning? How did, that was very interesting to me, and it was never explained, which I guess was part of the deal. But
he had a kind of a big brother thing, or I kind of also thought maybe he had a little bit of a man crush on Peter Sarsgaard, because he was very, he wasn't happy that Sarsgaard and Fanning were kind of connecting. And at the end, he said to Peter Sarsgaard, can we go off somewhere together and be alone? And can we just kind of be together? So I think he may have had a little big brother or man crush on Sarsgaard, it seemed to me. But we don't know who they are. We don't know their backgrounds, except that she's coming from privilege because she's got the money. But that's all we know.
I think in that sense, the film was sort of contrived. It was sort of like, we're going to have one kid who's rich and has the money and like has this idealist. Yeah, we're going to have this other one who's living on a commune and he's got this whole other experience. We have this other guy. So in a way, it's sort of like they just took them and just put them together. And that was a real weakness in the film, because I could never figure out
what was the attraction among them. I agree with that. Yeah.
Well, and to commit a federal crime with people that don't seem to have like a lot of trust with each other, that was such a bizarre feature of the plot line. Like, you have to be thick as thieves, right? You're going to go to the grave with this. But they clearly weren't. It was such an odd collection of people.
Although, let me just interject. There was a scene, maybe a couple of scenes, where it was clear to me that Jesse knew Skarsgård.
Oh yeah, definitely.
They knew each other. They had done some other things, but we weren't clear on what those other things were.
Well, he says to him, "This is bigger than the other stuff," or something to that.
We don't know what other stuff they did. So
yeah.
But yeah, he was always Jesse was always on edge the whole time. He was so many.
They needed somebody to buy the nitro, so they had the girl
Right.
that could go to the store and get the stuff.
Right.
You know what was so funny about this movie? Not funny, haha, but it reminded me a lot of Bonnie and Clyde, in
No.
that you're cheering for these people right along, and then you have to stop yourself and say, wait a minute, they're having this, they're doing this terrible thing, but you're saying, yeah, you can get that nitro, and you were cheering along for her, and when they were that marvelous sequence of scenes when they were actually doing the blowing up of the dam, and there was a car with a flat tire, and they had to go back and try to slow it down. I mean, you were cheering for them the whole way, and that's that was the device in Bonnie and Clyde, of course, but all the way through.
A really good point, Barbara.
But I don't know whether some of the younger people even remember Bonnie and Clyde, but all of the class of '61 does. So,
I remember, but I mean, I didn't see it till later, but I've seen it. It's a great film. The movie made me nervous. I was nervous most of this movie. It unnerved me because I knew it wasn't going to work out well. And she took her time. It was paced very deliberately. And I found myself, I mean, I couldn't move. I was mesmerized, but I was nervous. I mean, I just was kind of on edge the whole time.
It was very suspenseful.
It was, yeah.
It was good.
and the acting was so naturalistic. I actually didn't find Jesse's acting that great. I thought he was very wooden.
I don't like him as an actor.
I've seen him in other things, and he's always that way. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, he's just, I guess he gets by being sort of cute. But the third man, what was his name? Harmon.
Peter Sarsgaard.
Peter Sarsgaard was marvelous. He's a marvelous
Wonderful.
Yeah.
But then there was that other guy that looked sort of like him, and that was a little confusing. The other guy at the commune was complaining about not getting a license for something.
Oh yeah, burning his cheese license. Okay, so like ideologically, I was really trying to piece together what the directors, what was the story that they wanted us to take away. And I think there was an interesting juxtaposition of the sort of two schools of thought around environmental activism or climate change, like the act of the individual versus, and lots of small individual acts versus the other guy, the farmer guy, who was like, this is just theatrics, it's just one thing, it's not big enough to change anything. But they really didn't. And then like there was like the film screening with the director at the beginning. Like I was trying to kind of figure out what it is that they wanted us to take away, and I'm not sure I totally did catch the director's real message there. I understand those are kind of two different schools of thought in environmental activism, but like what were we supposed to be sold on?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I thought that was confusing.
Yeah, they could have made him tall and skinny and blonde. I mean, there's no reason to make him look like the other guy, the Sarsgaard character.
True, yeah.
Yeah.
Although when they were doing the review of the movie, it was the different characters, minor characters, were giving different viewpoints. And I think that was one of the things she was exploring is the different, how you could approach the whole environmental issues.
Mm-hmm.
Too big for us to do anything. I thought that was a good introduction, kind of, to the whole concept of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I'll just say so I did a little bit of reading, and I thought there was a really interesting point that Kelly Reichert made about when she goes to festivals, or she'll do a Q&A after her film, and people will raise their hand and say, okay, well, what am I supposed to think? Can you tell me, what did this mean? And she had a funny quote about, look, I put it all out there. That's what I put out there, and I don't want to say anymore. Like, that's not my job anymore. I put it out there. And, in a way, that sort of goes back to the point that I wanted to make about it being an independent film, right? And that a lot of times, none of you all, because you all are cinephiles, right? And you're used to watching films that aren't Hollywood films, but a lot of times Hollywood films have to wrap everything up in a neat bow. This is a hallmark of classic Hollywood cinema, is closure, right? And so when people don't get that closure, sometimes it's frustrating, right? And I know, Mom, you had said before we started the discussion that what did you say? Say it again. It was funny.
I said that I thought maybe my DVD player stopped working toward the end because I didn't see the end of the film. The last thing I saw was the mirror. And I played it twice. so that I could think about it. And I mean, I think it would be really interesting to ask people, what do you think happened after that? What would be the next scene if, what do you think?
Do you think he got caught?
That he eventually did.
I think so. Like when he, okay, so when, sorry about the spoilers, but like when he kills the girl, I'm like, okay, that was so stupid, because at that point other people knew that he had blown up the dam with her. Like there's no, like now you're just like being reckless. And then it was a very strange, and I suppose it was sort of spontaneous. He wasn't really thinking through his actions. But I was like, what are you doing? Everybody's going to know. Everyone's going to know it was you. It wasn't an accident.
I think the mirror, I mean, and I don't know, I didn't read a lot about the film. So Jennifer, you tell me if I'm way off here. But,
No, it's up to everybody. Everybody's interpretation.
But I mean, the fact that he gets this job in the store, and then we see this mirror. The mirror is there to catch people who are doing shoplifting and things like that. So she spends a lot of time to make the point with this mirror, and it made me think, well, maybe she's letting us know that you know, he's not going to get away. He's going to be caught. And you think about it, how could he get away with both of those things? He might get away with one, but not both of those. And he did nothing to really cover up the killing. He just ran. So I think that mirror to me was her way of saying he's not going to get away with this. You know?
You wonder what he's going to fill in the blanks of the application, though. Is he going to fill in his real name, or is he going to fill in his fake ID that he got?
Yeah, I had that same question, but
yeah.
You know, I mean, there's ways to, at some point that stuff's going to come back to haunt you if you know, I mean.
Go ahead.
We thought that he wasn't going to fill it out at all.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah.
Realized that.
I think he wasn't. Yeah.
Yeah, he couldn't get out of this one. He couldn't put
I
down
had a really dark interpretation, because he kept looking at those knives, and I thought that he was pretending to apply so that he could go over by those knives, and he looked in the mirror and saw that nobody was watching him, that he was going to take a knife and go out into the truck and kill himself.
Oh wow.
Whoa.
It was the dark thing. I mean, he's not going to get away with killing the girl.
Yeah.
I definitely thought, he kept looking at those knives. That was suspicious.
I thought that too. Not the killing, but I definitely thought he was going to steal a knife, and I was trying to think like what would be the end game. That's an interesting theory.
Well, they certainly, the director certainly focused on those knives for several seconds, which that's a good point. Yeah, but there were all kinds of, I mean, to the question of whether he was going to get caught, there were certainly all kinds of times when somebody could have noticed something, you know, the buying of fertilizer, et cetera. And I think they would have been caught eventually.
How did they get the fertilizer? Because that was never, you know, we were left thinking that he wasn't going to sell it to her.
Yeah.
So and then all of a sudden
he did eventually. Yeah.
I think
it's a big order.
Oh, you would
it's America. It's a big order.
I thought that the change there was when she said to him, when those two older gentlemen walked in, and she said, "Oh, you would sell it to me if I was these guys," and he was like, "Oh, I know them." And then I think that was the part where she sort of unraveled his, you know, unwillingness to sell to her, and he kind of gave in. I think it was just insinuated that he gave in.
I thought that interaction was so interesting too, especially when she took off her cap.
Yeah.
And like fluffed out her hair. I wondered, was that like a kind of thing?
Definitely.
I don't know.
Definitely.
I mean, you want to keep your hat on if you're trying to remain incognito. So I was like, no, don't take your hat off.
But that's why they sent the girl in.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, so thinking about this point about the camera work, right? And the way that the camera lingers on certain objects or certain places or certain things, you know, that we have that example of the knives, the knife case. Are there other times when you found yourself aware of the camera's movement or lack of movement, or sort of what was in the frame and how long you were seeing it?
The scene where they were in the boat after they had set the timer for the big boat to blow up. And then the director kept showing the people who had come into, in the distance.
The flat tire.
They were waiting for them to leave. And it was always a long distance shot, which I thought was very interesting. And I'm not sure what that was about, but it's something I noticed.
Yeah,
She
other
takes her
people
time.
thought, yeah, sorry, Steve, about that
No, I was
scene?
gonna
Or?
say she takes her time.
She does. She does.
She takes her
It's-
time.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah,
There's
I mean
no
that
hurry.
scene is fascinating, in terms of the suspense. I found it very similar to Hitchcock in many ways, and also the way that the way the murder is filmed is also very Hitchcockian. But yeah, the suspense that builds, and the timer, right? The device of the timer is such a classic device of creating suspense.
They're just waiting. They're just sitting there, and you're just thinking, what is going to happen next?
It made me nervous. I was nervous the whole movie. And Hitchcock makes me nervous. So, I mean, I think it was very Hitchcock-like because I was nervous this whole movie.
Well, is there something also, just going back to when Steve says she takes her time, right? I sometimes think about Hollywood movies today, the editing pacing. I mean, we talked about this, I think, 2 weeks ago, right, with The Hitchhiker, because the pacing of independent films and old movies often too is a little bit slower. So, this could have been, if you think about maybe a Hollywood director would have filmed this, maybe like cutting back and forth between different things, and, but the fact that it was like these long, a long take where the camera just rolls and you don't cut, right? And just the time we are sitting on that boat. I mean, I didn't time it, but it was almost felt like real time, like, right? It was set to, I guess it wasn't really 30 minutes, but the way that it's slow and the lack of cutting, I think, helps to, I don't know, how did that impact you all? Did you notice that?
I found it extremely frustrating. I'll be honest with
Really?
you. Her timing, I think, was not. It's not the job I would have done. There were certain scenes that she was taking way too long for no real reason. Now, when they were in the process of going to blow up the dam, yeah, and with the the emergency vehicles and the policemen come, all of that, you want to spend your time and you want to make people really nervous. But things like shots of the boat being towed, on the road, and quite frankly, I speeded up the Prime Video because plus I didn't want to spend so much time. It's an hour and 57 or 52 minutes or something. Mm-hmm. It's a very long movie, and it just becomes like certain shots, like when he was in a room, or she's panning and she's panning and she's panning and she's panning, and like, oh my goodness, just get on with it, without any real purpose. Some of it was definitely with purpose, and as this whole suspense and this darkness and stuff. But I would have taken some scissors and done some cutting.
I'm with you, Linda. When Alice and I were the first ones on the call and she asked about it, I said it was long, because I felt the same way about certain scenes where it was like riding in the car, just like this banter that didn't really seem to go anywhere. Or he wakes up in the yurt and then walks to the house, and you're just like, this is it. We're just watching him walk, I thought the same thing. It was a bit extended.
Maybe I was in a different mood, but I didn't feel, I was just sucked in. It made me nervous. I was sucked in.
Particularly when he went into the house. I couldn't figure out why he went in the house to go to the bathroom, and he's just like, okay, I really don't need to see this. Like, I don't think it added value.
I feel like this sometimes when I'm reading books that are just really overly descriptive, and I want something to happen, and I'm thinking, why am I reading all this description? Get on with the story, kind of thing. That was
The Lord of the
Feeling
Rings.
I was sucked into it. I didn't, I mean, in fact, I went back and watched part of it again as soon as it ended. I was sucked into it. So I had a different experience. Maybe it was just the mood I was in, but I was sucked right into it.
And I think the scene where the scene where he goes into the house where they're buying the boat from the man, where she focused in on the big screen TV.
Yes. Yes.
Looked down in the backyard, and there was some kind of fountain with a
Waterfall.
So it was kind of a lifestyle that was totally a lifestyle that he did not want to participate in. It was extravagant. And that's what I took away from that. Anyway, but I don't know if that's what she was trying to communicate or not, the director. But
Well, there were some long passages in the spa where the girl was, and that served, I think, as kind of an ironic point, because the spa was meant to be such a place of peace, and that music that was always playing when you came in, including when the murder took place. I think it made an ironic point. And that had some.
He was also very uncomfortable with those women, the women being topless and naked. He left, he was very uncomfortable around those women. So he had some issues of his own, I think, that he was dealing with.
we wanted to know what the symbolism was behind the stone. Remember when Dina was dangling the stone and the light was shining through it like a prism? That I don't know what that symbolically meant, but there had to be something there in that.
If you lived in Santa Fe, you'd understand crystals. We have a lot of that kind of stuff here.
So
everywhere.
So what is the meaning?
It just goes with along with the spas and the just kind of moves stuff. Yeah.
Is there some kind of curative or healing powers of Joan?
You can focus on
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just curious.
Yeah, and it was kind of interesting that that I guess it was kept in the cash register, right? And she sort of looked at it, I thought longingly or something, right? But then put it back, right? I sort of had the thought that maybe she was going to steal it, but she didn't, right? She put it back. But you're right, that's another scene where the camera stays on that quite a long time, and the light reflects off the stone, and there's definitely something. It seems like Reichert's very good at accumulating these moments where you think they're fraught with meaning, and then she kind of makes us work, right? We have to work, which is, I think it's fun to watch a movie. I was an art history major as an undergraduate, and decoding the Dutch Renaissance paintings for all the little imagery and symbolism. That's how I came to film studies. So I love the idea of the decoding and the readings and for Kelly Reichardt, there isn't a right answer, right? It's what we take out of it, right? And how we put all the pieces together to make something. And I think it's hard to make something out of this film because it is so open-ended, right? And we get so little information about these three characters. We have to fill in the details, and the point about Josh going into the man's house and seeing the trappings of bourgeois capitalism, and remember he said about people want to listen to their iPod 24 hours a day, and that's bullshit, or I can't remember what the line was, right? But the idea that's what he's against, all of it right there in that house, right? The other thing that I think is interesting, I didn't know if anyone wanted to say anything more about when they're driving away, right? So one of the things that's fascinating, I think, about this movie is that what the whole movie is about, or let's say the dramatic thing that this movie is about, is not shown on screen, right? So there's a way in which things that happen off screen in this movie. Like really important key moments happen off screen. And I wonder if anyone wanted to reflect about that in terms of the blowing up of the dam and how she chooses. I mean, think about how would a Hollywood film have chosen to portray that moment, right?
So I was going to point out when they're driving away and they hear the noise, and then Jessie smiles. She looks really uncomfortable. She's not happy about this. And then another really interesting thing is when she and Jessie, Dina and
Josh
are driving themselves. Did you see her start to do this?
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, wow, something's wrong with her. I really felt this was showing that she was not comfortable with this.
She has that rash at the end.
Later you saw the rash. She started doing that when they were driving away. The other small moment I noticed was when he heard that there was a camper missing. Did you all notice the tear?
Yes. Yeah.
He shed one tear, and the camera focused on that one tear. And it was a humanizing moment for him, I think. Made him more human after he realized.
But that wasn't the same man they met, was it? You know, they met that man. That wasn't the same man that died.
That was my question. I don't know. I
movie
thought it might be.
I thought the same thing until he looked it up on the internet. And the photo was like a dark-haired guy who didn't have any facial hair, and I thought the guy.
Okay, yeah.
Wow.
I get it.
That was my first.
But when we first met the first guy, I thought that's going to be the guy that dies.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and then did you notice there was a shot of those two little boys? There were two little kids walking along the sand, and I was like, oh my God,
Me
kids!
too. I thought they were going to be killed. I did. and when I was watching it, before Jessie killed her, I was taking notes and I wrote, I hope they don't kill her. I mean, I was like frightened. I was like, oh, please don't kill her. And then I began to wonder why. It seemed like, you know, that last scene where he's calling up Harmon to see if he'll run away with him. I think he killed Dina for him. I feel like he killed her for him because remember, Harmon called him and said, Dina's falling apart. I don't want to go back to prison. Remember that conversation? I thought that he I think maybe he killed her for his friend, and then how awful his friend then abandoned him. You got to go away. You got to go far.
Yeah.
Hang up. I'm not going with you.
Yeah.
Well, I think he definitely had a thing for, I mean, there was definitely some kind of man crush or bromance or something going on there because he was uncomfortable looking at the women in the spa because he left, and he does make that point to ask Sarsgaard, can we go away together? Can we just be alone, the two of us? So there was some sexuality challenges or something that he was struggling with, I think. I think that was very clear.
That's interesting that you bring that up because I also wondered, like, the other female character that demonstrates interest in him is just kind of a random.
Yes.
Right. So, who I best know is Maeve from Arrested Development, and she obviously. Like, you guys know Arrested Development? Yes. Okay. That's who I know her from. So she obviously has some interest in him, and she approaches him, and he's just kind of very distant from her. He's very distant from Dina. You can't really figure out who he's connecting with emotionally. That's an interesting point, Steve, about maybe his affinity was with Harmon.
Absolutely. There's also that scene where he's by himself in the morning. He's kind of walking among the trees. And I don't know if Harmon and Dakota Fanning hooked up or what, but he's out there by himself in the morning, and the other two are not with him. So I don't know. I just definitely felt like a lot of what was driving his character was some internal conflict with who he really was. But that was very clear.
We were wondering why Dina didn't get out of there the first encounter he had with her at the end there. Why didn't she just leave instead of, be close by where he found her again? I thought that was really strange. You know, when he found her in the sauna place. I mean, she should have run.
He didn't think that she was in that much danger, I don't think, from him.
Well, not, but they just
It was a scary kind of setup, but you know, I think she was still thinking we did this together, and I'm hating that I'm in this place, but he wasn't the one she was scared of.
I thought it was ironic, another irony, that a woman director and writer would make the woman in the trio the weak link, the one who gets it's the one who, you know, is threatening to blow their cover, et cetera, et cetera. So that was kind of strange.
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
That's a great point.
So in some ways we would expect, if it's a woman filmmaker, that she's going to have strong female characters and girl power, right? Yeah, that's a very interesting assumption to make. And you know, I think that speaks a lot to some of the responsibility and the burden that sometimes marginalized filmmakers feel, right? BIPOC filmmakers, women filmmakers, you have to make those characters strong, and that wasn't the story she wanted to tell, I guess, right? So
she seemed strong in that, certainly in that scene at the feed store, or the place where she was buying fertilizer. That was, first of all, it was brilliant acting. It was wonderful.
Yeah.
And in fact, all the acting was great, except, as I said, I'm not crazy about Jesse.
Right.
But the others, I mean, when they were driving and they were stopped at the roadblock by the police, all of that acting was just so natural. They were just like real people.
Yeah.
Amazing. The woman officer, etc.
Yeah, my husband had remarked that it kind of felt a little bit more like a documentary than a fictional film, especially because of the kind of ambiguity, right? People, regular people, if you're not a character, right? Regular people are kind of ambiguous. Sometimes you don't know why you did something. You just maybe thought it was the right thing to do at the time, or right. And you know, the other thing that struck me, Barbara, that I was going to say about Dina is she is the only one who appears to have a moral conscience. I mean, you know, he cries one tear. Harmon, who knows, right? But I mean, so maybe there's something. And again, I don't know if that's a stereotypical thing about women, but she and yeah, I don't know. That's a really interesting point. If we had Kelly Reichardt here, I'd like to ask her that question or the point that you just made, right?
She's also the one that has privilege. She's the privileged character. Yep. She has money. Her family obviously has money. So.
Yeah.
I thought that Josh he seemed pretty conflicted to me most of the film. That was the impression that I got, and always on edge. And whereas Skarsgård, I think she made a point. Skarsgård was just kind of like this guy. He knew how to deal with the emotion of this, and it's like not much fazed him. At least that's the impression he gave when Dina was going into the fertilizer place, and she was refused the first time. Josh was telling her, "Let's get out of here," you know. And Harmon, was that his name? Harmon. He was saying, "Oh, wait a second. It's in your face. You got to go back in and just make one more attempt, and if he doesn't sell it to you, then we'll leave. You just can't leave like this, because then what's going on?" He was very composed. I thought very composed, very knew exactly what he was doing, and I think he also knew this. If this went south like this, when he was talking to John, and he said, "Man, you got to get lost. I don't want anything to do with you. You know, you're not going to pull me into this." So anyway, that's my thoughts.
So it's interesting. In our house, we had at the end of the movie, we had discussions about, you know, why they did it, you know, and whether, you know, what, again, maybe this goes back to some of what you were asking, Bethany, and some of what you were mentioning, Steve, at the beginning, but, you know, what their motives were for doing this. And I wonder if anyone wanted to weigh in on what their motives were. I have a quote from A.O. Scott of the New York Times, and I'll tell you what he thinks their motives are, but I want to hear what you all think their motives were.
motive was to stop the damming of the rivers. And
Okay.
return to nature. It's gone on legally, some of it, and out on the peninsula, they've taken some of the dams down. But
Okay, so it's an environmentalist motive.
Oh, yeah, they thought they were right.
they were doing good. They were doing what should have been done.
I think they had drunk the Kool-Aid of radical environmentalists. I mean, that's what I took. They were just, they had drunk that Kool-Aid, and he was living on the farm with this family, and she was getting money from her dad to, buy the boat. And, I think they were just, that was kind of what their path was. They had become radical environmentalists. That was what I took.
One of the
Maybe
things that I found was
something.
interesting is the way she used minor characters to bring out information.
Mhm.
Like there was the comment about this was only one dam out of, I don't know, whatever it was, 100 or whatever it was, whatever the number, large number. So that it was an majorly insignificant
Right.
impact after the fact, which again is extremely discouraging for somebody to have gone through that and done that and had the death of the man, and yet no, you really haven't done much at all. But she used minor characters, she used other ways to get around it without the main characters necessarily giving that information.
I thought, because Jesse made the remark about blowing up the dam, and he mentioned the salmon and the energy that the dams were, basically he alluded to the energy that the dams create for people to run their iPods. So for him, I think it was clearly environmental, obviously, his farm work and kind of living off the grid. Harmon, I assumed that was the case, although we never really saw much character development with him. We never really spent as much time with him. And with Dina, I think it was a little less, I think it was much more ambiguous. She was young, maybe she had just kind of met these people through the farm and she was like, yeah, this is cool. But I don't think for her, even at the film screening, when she asked the question of the director, I didn't get the sense that she was like, really understood, even ideologically, the environmental activism that she was already looped into. And I think that's also why her reaction to the fallout of the situation was much more immature, much less prepared. I think Harmon and Josh both understood in a more mature or nuanced way what they were committing to. And for her, I think she was new to all of this, and she had just kind of been brought into it as an accessory.
One of the things that I thought was really weak was the very beginning dialogue as they were walking across the dam. And I wouldn't have realized what they were saying if I was just listening to it, but I happen to have closed captions on. And they talk about the fact that there were no ladders on the dam. They had not put any ladders on for the salmon to be able to spawn. And I think that it very well could have been lost by a lot of people. That comment, which is really an intro into the whole idea about, it helps the fact that you've read a little summary of what the movie's about ahead of time, so you're ready for it. But coming into that cold, I think it would have been lost in the movie theater if you're looking at it.
The dialogue was really hard to hear there in the beginning. In fact,
yes, exactly.
I had to go back and turn on closed captioning because I thought all the other sounds drowned out what they were saying, and I would have missed that completely.
Yeah.
Well, I think that us in Atlanta, maybe, I don't know, we've had so much protesting and stuff like this. I just felt like I was right back in another scene of, idealistic young people and some hardened protesters, and how it's going to all work out. It seems every day there's another bad situation that has happened overnight, and it was unending to me. And this was just like another little episode in the Times.
and I
Well,
don't think I'm going to see this movie.
Sorry, Alice. Oh,
No.
I'm with you, Mary White.
well, okay. So I have just sort of another question. I'll tell you what A.O. Scott said. He said it was the motives were despair, muddled idealism, and boredom. And I don't know if that was meant for one was for each character or it was for all of them. But I sort of felt like Dina was, just wanted to belong to something. And this was her way of kind of like belonging, right? And the way that she kind of bought in, right? Because she had the money, they needed her. And so that's how she belonged, through her money. But let me ask one more question. Do you think that you would have felt different about the movie if no one had died as a result?
Sure.
You would have.
Yeah. Well, I felt that the actors would have felt a lot different. I guess. That was completely unexpected, and that's what threw her.
I agree. That was a turning point and a sad moment, and it really did kind of flip the whole equation.
Mm-hmm.
Messages, you don't always know what's going to come out in the end. Events happen, you have little control, or they have little control over.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and actually that could be another, that's interesting that you say that. I hadn't thought of it in quite that way, but that could sort of be another, if we're looking for what do we take away from this movie, the idea that, once you set something in motion, right, there's a point at which you have little control over it and you can't take it back, and so thinking about the effects, all the possible effects of your actions, right? Because I don't think they they didn't want to cause harm to anyone.
She was very concerned when they were driving in through the park area. The fact that there were all of these families and kids and so forth. And you said, we're choosing a time when there's nobody here.
Yep.
This is the bad time of the year to do this. So she was becoming apprehensive.
Yeah. Yeah, and Riker does such a good job of like filming the families, right? You just see, and they're looking around, and there's a little kid by the campfire, and there's the fact that she, there's another example of the panning, which maybe was annoying, but it gave that suspense of like, yeah, there's a lot of families in this campground.
No, that pan I liked. I think it worked. I think it was effective. Yeah.
I think there was a shift too in the gravity of the situation. There's a sort of way in which we're like, oh, property damage is bad. But when people die, we're like, oh, this is really bad. And I think there's that intuitive way in Dina's mind too. Like, it was like, oh, the dam blowing up, we're doing a bad thing, not we're actually endangering people, not even anticipating the flooding and the fallout and all of the possibilities there. So yeah, I think it made a big difference that there was loss of life, because otherwise it was just, a bad thing.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Another sort of a moment that I noticed, and I wasn't sure, I don't know if Riker did as much as she could with it, but I don't know if you remember when they asked Josh to get out of the truck at the police stop, and she did a shot of his feet, his boots, which were muddy. And I was like, oh, muddy boots. And I was like, maybe that's just to increase the suspense, but it was such like a throwaway. I mean, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What else? And yeah.
Did anyone notice the music, the thread of music through the movie?
I didn't like it.
No.
I enjoy it. Was kind of comforting to me.
Really?
Sort of a thread, a very subtle. I really enjoyed the music. It was very subtle, but it was comforting.
That
other things going on.
Interesting. I did notice that it was constant. I don't think, was there ever a scene where there wasn't music playing?
I don't know. I don't know that there was.
I didn't notice. So
It was different.
What else? Other observations or thoughts that people had that they wanted to share that we haven't talked about?
I want to see the rest of her films, Jennifer. I haven't
Yeah,
seen,
you know,
I've only seen
Wendy and Lucy. Yeah.
I
But I
saw-
really want to see the Western. I'm excited to see Meek's Cut
Yeah.
Off.
I saw
apparently-
Old Joy. That's
Okay,
the
and
only
how
one
was
I've
that?
seen.
Yeah.
It's good. I liked it a whole lot. It's had that kind of slow pace like
Mhm.
this film did, but I liked it, and I liked this, and I was thinking I got to see the rest of her canon because I'm very intrigued. So
Well, and
thank
the way
you.
she, one thing we didn't talk too much about, but the way she shoots the landscape, right? And
Yeah.
obviously in this movie, land is really, really important. But I know in Old Joy, that's also a big part of Old Joy.
All
and in
about
Wendy
the
and
land.
Lucy, the landscape is really important. It's, it's like another character in the film, right? I mean,
Definitely.
in fact, that great shot of, the trees, right? Was right? Or is that something that I've looked at before about, I feel like it's in a still from the movie. There's like trees that have become matchsticks from the flooding.
Oh, yeah, they did show the trees in the
Okay.
Parker.
Movie, yeah.
Okay, good. I'm wondering, who knows where we're bombarded by images all day, every day. You don't get, sometimes it's hard to take them back to the source, right? What else? Other thoughts about the film? Alice said she doesn't think she's going to see it. Would anyone else
I
recommend
think
or not
Alice
recommend
should
it
see
to
I'm
friends?
just going to
Oh,
say,
yeah.
Alice, you should see it.
Alice,
Okay.
Alice,
could
I
not
would
take my eyes
see it.
off. I really thought it was good.
Definitely.
Okay.
I do too.
I flunked finding it on Amazon. So I have to
Oh,
pull
well,
it.
it was, originally when I made the film series, it was on Prime, but then it moved or something. These things, they change really quickly. So I ultimately watched it on YouTube, and I had to pay, I think, $3.99 for it.
On YouTube? Oh, good. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
But Alice,
So-
I went last night and found it on Amazon Prime for free.
Yeah, I think it's there. I just didn't.
I couldn't find it. Jennifer couldn't find it.
Yeah.
It's on Amazon Prime.
I could not
Okay.
find it.
Crazy.
Helen, you didn't say much, but I wondered, what did you like about it? Can you, what riveted you?
Well, I just thought I thought it was sad. I thought it was just sad. They were young and idealistic, maybe from two different perspectives. It wasn't going to do any good. They didn't get through. It's like there was a great sadness in the thing.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I agree.
I wonder if this movie is based on a real event
Oh.
of a dam destruction.
So
Is it-
on that note, in 2014, a documentary came out that I had watched a while ago, and I thought about it during this. It's called Damnation. And that is probably the only reason I kind of knew about environmental activism around dams. I don't know that there was a specific incident, but the same year that this film was made, this documentary came out. It's all one word, Damnation, and it's about all of the dams in the US and the impact that they've had ecologically on the rivers and why people protest them.
Yeah.
There have been demonstrations, and I don't remember, it's been a while since I watched it, if there had been attempts to blow up various dams, but there had been like major demonstrations by environmental activists. It's worth watching. It was actually very interesting. It's been a few years since I saw that.
I've never heard of anybody doing that. It's happened.
What else? Anything else before we go? I hope everyone will join us in 2 weeks. And in 2 weeks, we'll be watching Agnès Varda, woman pioneer of the French New Wave, in a contemporary film of hers, again, which I haven't seen. I'll be watching it just right along with you all right before. So I hope you'll enjoy it and join us. And if anyone has anything else they want to ask or talk about, please feel free to email me at Randolph.
What's the name of the film? What's the name of the film?
It's Faces, Places. Faces, Places. It's a documentary, so it'll be different than a feature film, but it promises to be very intriguing. Varda is known for her creativity and innovation. So if you're worried that it's a documentary, don't be worried. I think it'll be beautiful and intriguing.
Do you have to register again every time to get on Zoom? Or
Yes.
Yeah.
Zoom.
I'm
So-
going to, I'll just pop the link in the chat really quickly where you can go and register if you'd like, but it's on the alum office page, and you can register for next time. Let me just find my chat box here. And
feel free to spread the word.
Yes, invite your friends.
Yeah.
To see you all back. That's on the 23rd.